They say trust is built over years but destroyed in seconds. I never thought I'd doubt Lily. But lately, something felt different. And behind those locked doors upstairs, I was starting to fear. I didn't know her anymore. For over 10 years, we had built a life that others envied. A life filled with quiet mornings over coffee, late-night talks that stretched until dawn, and dreams we wove together like threads in a tapestry. Our home in the suburbs of Boston was a reflection of that life, warm, inviting, and filled with memories. Lily had poured her heart into every corner of the house. As an interior designer, she had an eye for beauty. She transformed our home into a sanctuary, where the walls whispered stories of love and trust. And her studio, that was her sacred space. A light-filled room on the second floor, where she created her best work. It was where dreams came to life. But lately, that room felt different. Lily had been spending more time there, hours upon hours behind closed doors. At first, I didn't question it. She had mentioned a new, ambitious project, a high-profile client who demanded perfection. Deadlines, she would say with a tired smile. I just need to focus. I believed her, because that's what trust is. But trust, it blinds you. She used to share everything with me. Her ideas, her sketches. We'd sit together at the dining table, and she'd ask for my thoughts. I wasn't an expert, but she valued my opinion. Your perspective keeps me grounded, she used to say. But that stopped. Now, when I asked how her work was going, she'd give me a distracted smile. Fine. Just busy. Always busy. The doors to her studio were always closed. Locked. At first, I didn't think much of it. She needed space. Privacy. I respected that. But then, the small things started adding up. She became distant. Her laughter, once so genuine and infectious, now felt forced. Her eyes, which used to light up when she saw me, were empty. I tried to ignore it, told myself it was just stress. But even when she was beside me, she felt miles away. Her phone became an extension of her hand. Always close, always locked. I noticed how she tilted the screen away when I walked into the room. How she'd silence notifications with a quick swipe. Her smile a little too tight. But the worst part? The nights. She started staying in the studio late. Too late. Sometimes, she wouldn't come to bed at all. I'd find her asleep on the couch in her studio the next morning, claiming she had lost track of time. But I wasn't blind. I saw the way she flinched when I asked if everything was okay. I heard the whispers coming from behind that locked door. Low, muffled, cut off the moment I came too close. Who were you talking to? I asked one night, standing outside her studio. Just a client, she replied, her voice too smooth. I wanted to believe her. But the way she avoided my eyes, I knew something was wrong. I tried to brush it off. Tried to convince myself I was imagining things. But doubt, it grows, like a weed, creeping into every corner of your mind until it chokes the life out of everything else. One night, I found myself standing outside her studio door again. The lights were still on. It was past midnight. I pressed my ear to the door, straining to hear, but there was only silence. Too much silence. And that's when I saw it. Her phone, left unattended on the kitchen counter. Unlocked. Lily never left her phone lying around. But that night, she slipped. I hesitated. My mind screamed at me not to look, to walk away, to trust her. But my gut begged me to look. My hand trembled as I picked up the phone. One swipe, and everything changed. Messages. Dozens of them. From a name I didn't recognize. Mark. The texts were intimate. Too intimate. I can't wait to see you again. Last night was perfect. When can I have you all to myself? My heart slammed against my ribs, each beat louder than the last. I scrolled further. Photos. A glass of wine. Dim lighting. The same studio. Our studio. But the scene wasn't set for work. It was set for something else. I felt sick. My mind was racing, trying to piece together a puzzle I didn't want to solve. Mark. Who was he? How long had this been going on? I set the phone down carefully, as if touching it any longer would burn me. My breath was shallow, my hands shaking. No, this can't be happening. But the evidence was right in front of me, and my heart, it already knew the truth. When Lily came down from her studio later that night, her face was calm. Too calm. "Hey," she murmured, kissing my cheek like nothing was wrong, like she wasn't tearing me apart piece by piece. "Everything okay?" Her voice was soft, but I heard the lies beneath it. I forced a smile. "Yeah, elite." Because I wasn't ready. Not yet. But something inside me had shifted. The seed of doubt had taken root. And soon, it would grow into something neither of us could ignore. They say your gut never lies. But I had spent weeks trying to silence mine. I told myself I was imagining things. That Lily was just stressed. That the distance between us was temporary. But deep down, I knew better. Ever since I saw those messages on her phone, everything felt different. I couldn't look at her the same way. Her touch, once a source of comfort, now felt foreign. Her laughter, which used to fill our home with warmth, felt hollow. And when she looked at me, I saw the guilt. But I didn't confront her. Not yet. I needed more. Proof. Because confrontation without evidence, that's just an argument waiting to be dismissed. So I watched. I became an observer in my own home. Quiet. Patient. Waiting for her to slip. And slowly, the cracks became impossible to ignore. It started with the little things. Lily used to be predictable. Our routines were like second nature, dinners together, cozy movie nights, long walks on the weekends. But now, everything had changed. She started going to client meetings at odd hours. Evenings, weekends, times when clients usually didn't schedule appointments. Late deadlines, she'd say with a tight smile. But I knew better. Her lies were starting to unravel. Then came the studio, her sanctuary, her escape. But now, it was her hiding place. The door was always locked. Always. Even when I was home. Lily never used to lock it. But now, she did. One night I tested it. After she had retreated upstairs, claiming she needed a few more hours to finish a design. I followed. I stood outside the studio door, pressing my ear against the wood. Silence. But then, a whisper. Low. Muffled. A man's voice. My heart pounded in my ears. I strained to hear. But the voices stopped the moment I shifted closer. Like they knew I was there. "Lily." I knocked softly, trying to keep my voice steady. No response. A beat of silence. Then, the sound of movement. A moment later, the door cracked open. Lily stood there, her face calm. But her eyes, they betrayed her. "Hey," she said softly, her smile too forced. "Everything okay?" I looked past her, trying to see inside. The room looked normal. Her desk, her sketches. But my gut told me something wasn't right. Just wanted to see how it was going. I murmured, my voice quieter than I intended. Lily's smile didn't reach her eyes. "Almost done," she said quickly. "Just need a little more time." Time. She wasn't talking about the project. And we both knew it. I stepped back, forcing a smile. "Okay, I'll let you work." But as I turned away, I saw it. A shadow. Near the far corner of the room. Just for a second. Gone before I could be sure. But I knew. Someone was there. That night I didn't sleep. I lay in bed, staring at the ceiling, my mind racing. The whispers. The locked doors. The shadow. Who was he? The next morning, Lily was different. Softer. More attentive. As if she could sense the walls closing in. She kissed me longer. Asked about my day with genuine interest. Laughed at my jokes. Felt fake. "Everything okay?" I asked over breakfast, watching her carefully. Her smile was bright. Too bright. "Of course," she said, her voice light, but her eyes flickered. For a second. And in that moment, I knew she was hiding something. Days passed. And the distance between us grew wider. Lily stayed in the studio more. The door always locked. And I I became consumed with finding the truth. I started keeping track of her schedule, her patterns, her movements. She was careful, but not careful enough. Nobody is. One evening, when she said she had another late night at the studio, I decided to test her. I waited until she was fully immersed in her work. Then I quietly walked upstairs and tried the door. Locked, as always, but this time, I had the key. Lily had forgotten that I still had a spare. A small oversight, one that would change everything. My hand hovered over the handle, my pulse pounding. "Don't do this," a voice whispered in the back of my mind. But I couldn't stop. Not now. I needed to know. I slid the key into the lock. A soft click echoed in the hallway. I pushed the door open, and what I saw stopped me cold. The room was different. The desk with her sketches had been pushed aside. In its place, a small table, 2 wine glasses, a half-empty bottle of red. The scent of vanilla lingered in the air, mixing with the faint aroma of extinguished candles. On the couch, pillows, scattered, disheveled, a blanket, rumpled. But it was the chair in the corner that made my stomach drop. A man's shirt, crumpled, and draped carelessly over the back. Not mine. My breath caught in my throat as my eyes moved to the side table. A small bottle of cologne. Expensive. Not mine. "Derek?" The word barely escaped my lips, but it echoed in the room like a death sentence. This wasn't a workspace. It was a lover's den. The air felt heavy, suffocating. My mind raced to make sense of it. But the truth was undeniable. Someone else had been here, with her. I backed away slowly, my heart pounding in my ears. I didn't need to see more. I had seen enough. Lily had locked the door, because she was hiding him. And now, I knew. They say once you see the truth, you can't unsee it. And now, I couldn't unsee it. The wine glasses, the candles, the rumpled pillows, the shirt that wasn't mine. Someone else had been here, with her, in our home. I stood there, my body frozen, my mind racing to keep up with what my eyes had just witnessed. But no matter how hard I tried to deny it, the evidence was right in front of me. I backed out of the studio slowly, my heart pounding in my ears. I closed the door softly, as if keeping the truth locked away would somehow make it disappear. But it was too late for that. The door might have closed, but Pandora's box had already been opened. By the time I made it downstairs, my hands were trembling. I sank into the couch, running my fingers through my hair, trying to make sense of what I had just seen. Who was he? How long had this been going on? Why would she do this? The questions spun in my mind, colliding with memories of the life we had built. A life that was now crumbling around me. I glanced at the clock. It was nearly midnight. Lily was still upstairs, alone. At least that's what I told myself. But now, I wasn't sure anymore. I should have confronted her, should have demanded answers. But I didn't, because I wasn't ready. Not yet. I needed more. I needed to be sure, because if I was going to confront her, there would be no turning back. The next morning, Lily was different, soft, attentive, almost like she could sense the shift. "Morning," she murmured, her lips brushing against mine. Her touch was gentle, but all I could feel was distance. "Morning," I murmured back, forcing a smile, but it felt hollow, because I knew. "Coffee?" she asked, already moving toward the kitchen. I watched her carefully, the way her shoulders tensed, the way her smile didn't quite reach her eyes. She was hiding something, and now, I was determined to find out what. The next few days were a blur. I went through the motions, pretending everything was fine. But behind the mask, I was piecing things together. Watching, waiting, collecting the truth. Lily was careful, but not careful enough. She had patterns, habits, and once I started paying attention, the cracks became impossible to ignore. She spent more time in the studio, locked away, sometimes for hours. And when I knocked, she'd call out with that same tired excuse, deadlines. But the whispers, They told a different story. One night, I stayed awake, pretended to sleep, and when I heard her footsteps creep past our bedroom, I followed. The light in the studio was dim, but I could see her silhouette through the glass. Phone pressed to her ear, her voice low, too low. I couldn't hear the words, but I didn't need to. I knew. I waited until she was done, until the call ended and the light went out. Then I slipped back into bed before she noticed. The next day, while she was out, I went back to the studio. This time, I wasn't looking for signs. I was looking for proof. I checked her laptop first. It was clean. Too clean. Lily had always been meticulous. But this was intentional. Then I saw it. Folder. Hidden. Encrypted. But she forgot one thing. I knew her better than anyone. Took me less than 5 minutes to crack it. And what I found made my blood run cold. Emails. Dozens of them. From Mark. Mark. The name I had seen on her phone. But now, it was all laid out in front of me. I can't stop thinking about you. He doesn't have to know. Soon, Lily. We'll have everything we want. I scrolled further. Photos. Intimate. Private. Things that weren't meant for me. My jaw clenched, my pulse pounding. How long? How long had this been happening? And then, I found it. The message that changed everything. I miss you. I'll be back in town this weekend. This weekend. Tomorrow. My mind went blank. All I could see was red. Mark wasn't just a name on her phone. He was coming here. I closed the laptop carefully. My hands were steady. But inside, I was burning. Lily had built a life with me. A life I had poured my heart into. But now, she was tearing it apart. I stood in the middle of the studio, surrounded by the remnants of a life I thought was real. And in that moment, I made a decision. I wasn't going to wait anymore. It was time to end this. That night, I was quiet. Too quiet. Lily noticed. Everything okay? She asked softly, her eyes searching mine. Yeah, Elite. Because tomorrow, everything would change. As she fell asleep beside me, I lay awake, eyes wide open, heart pounding, waiting. Tomorrow, I would meet Mark. And when that happened, Lily's lies would finally come crashing down. They say the moment before a storm is the quietest. But this silence, it was suffocating. Lily was asleep beside me, her breathing soft, steady, as if everything was normal. But I knew better, because tomorrow, nothing would be normal again. I stared at the ceiling, my mind racing. Mark was coming. Tomorrow. The emails had confirmed it. And Lily, she was waiting for him. I felt like a stranger in my own home. The woman lying beside me wasn't the same woman I had married. Or maybe, she never was. I replayed everything in my mind. The long nights, the locked doors, the whispers, the lies. How had I missed it? How had I been so blind? But love makes you see what you want to see. And now, I couldn't unsee the truth. I turned my head, watching Lily sleep. Her face was peaceful. But I couldn't help but wonder, was she dreaming of him? My jaw clenched, my heart pounding louder than it should have. I wanted to wake her, to demand answers, to make her look me in the eye and admit what she had done. But not yet, not like this, because tomorrow, I'd have all the answers I needed. Morning came too soon. I barely slept. But I didn't need sleep. I needed clarity. And today, I was going to get it. Lily was different that morning. Brighter, lighter, as if some invisible weight had been lifted off her shoulders. But it wasn't gone. She had just shifted it onto me. Morning, she murmured, pressing a kiss to my cheek. Her touch was warm, but I felt nothing. Morning, I replied softly, hiding the storm beneath the surface. Busy day ahead? She asked casually, pouring herself coffee. Yeah, I murmured, keeping my tone even. She didn't notice. She never did. She moved around the kitchen, humming softly, like everything was fine, like she wasn't planning to bring him into our home. I watched her carefully, the way her eyes flicked toward her phone, the The way her fingers lingered just a little too long on the screen. Waiting. She thought I was clueless. But I wasn't the man she had been lying to anymore. I was a man preparing for war. Heading to the studio today? I asked casually, keeping my voice neutral. Her hand froze for a fraction of a second. But then she recovered. Yeah, she said softly. Deadline's coming up. Another lie. I forced a smile. Good luck? I murmured, kissing her forehead. But my mind was already 10 steps ahead. She left shortly after, and I followed. I kept my distance, trailing her carefully. Her car moved through familiar streets, heading toward the studio. But I wasn't interested in her studio. I was interested in who was coming next. I parked down the block out of sight, waiting, watching, counting down the minutes. An hour passed, then another. My patience was wearing thin. But I knew he was coming. And then he arrived. A sleek black BMW pulled up in front of the house. My jaw clenched. The man who stepped out, tall, confident, charismatic. Mark. I recognized him immediately, even though I hadn't seen him in years. He looked the same, smug, arrogant, like the kind of man who thought the world owed him something. He stood outside for a moment, checking his reflection in the car window, fixing his shirt, straightening his collar, like he was preparing for a date. I gripped the steering wheel tighter, my knuckles turning white. Stay calm. Not yet. Mark walked up to the front door, knocked softly, and a few seconds later, Lily opened it. Her smile, it was real. The kind of smile I hadn't seen in months. The kind of smile she used to give me. But now, it was his. I watched as they kissed. Soft, familiar, intimate, like they had done it 1,000 times before. My stomach twisted, but I didn't move. Not yet. They went inside. The door closed behind them, and I waited. Minutes passed, then an hour, and finally, I couldn't wait any longer. I stepped out of my car, my footsteps steady. The weight of what I was about to do settled over me. But I didn't hesitate. Not anymore. I walked toward the front door, my heart pounding in my ears. Each step felt heavier than the last. But I was ready. I had to be. I reached the door, and without thinking twice, I opened it. The house was quiet, too quiet, but I knew where they were. Upstairs. I climbed the stairs slowly, each step echoing in my mind. My pulse was pounding, but my hands were steady, because this wasn't just about confronting her. This was about ending the lies. I reached the door to her studio, locked, again. But this time, I didn't knock. I pulled out the spare key, slid it into the lock, and with a soft click, the door opened. What I saw shattered everything. Lily was there, sitting on the couch, wrapped in a blanket. With him, Mark's arm was draped casually over her shoulder. Their wine glasses sat half-empty on the table. Candles flickered softly, casting a warm glow over the room. It was intimate, comfortable, familiar. Lily's head rested against Mark's chest. Her eyes were closed. But when the door creaked open, they both looked up. Lily's eyes met mine. And in that moment, everything stopped. Her face paled. Her lips parted. Derek? A whisper. A plea. Too late. Mark's eyes narrowed. But he didn't move. He didn't need to, because I wasn't here for him. I was here for her. Derek? Lily's voice trembled, her eyes wide with panic. This isn't... Save it. I murmured, my voice barely above a whisper. My eyes never left hers. I saw everything. Her face crumbled. The lies, the facade, all of it gone. Derek? She whispered again, her voice breaking, but I felt nothing. Mark shifted beside her, his posture tense. Look, man, he started. But I cut him off with a single glance. Don't. I took a step inside. The air felt heavier, thicker, suffocating. But I wasn't the one who was suffocating now. They were. Derek? Lily's voice was barely a whisper now, but I didn't answer. I just watched. as the weight of her betrayal settled on her shoulders. Why? I finally asked, my voice low. It was the only word I could manage, because deep down, I already knew the answer. Her eyes filled with tears. But tears couldn't fix this. Not anymore. Derek, don't, I said softly. My voice was calm, but inside, I was broken. I trusted you, I murmured, my throat tight. I gave you everything. Lily's face crumbled. Please, she whispered, but I shook my head. No, I turned to leave, because there was nothing left to say, nothing left to save. As I walked away, I heard her sobs echo behind me, but I didn't stop. Couldn't, because some doors, once they're closed, they stay closed. They say betrayal doesn't break you all at once. It happens in pieces. Small, jagged fragments that cut deeper every time you try to move on. And as I walked away from Lily and Mark that night, I felt every single piece. The air was thick, suffocating. As I stepped outside, the cool night breeze brushed against my skin, but I couldn't feel it. My mind was still trapped upstairs. In that room, the flickering candlelight, the wine glasses, Lily's head on his chest. I had walked away, but the images followed me, playing on repeat, torturing me. I sat in my car, gripping the steering wheel so tightly my knuckles turned white. My heart was pounding. My breaths were shallow. And no matter how much I tried to clear my mind, I couldn't escape it. Lily's face, the panic in her eyes when she saw me, the way she whispered my name, like I was a stranger. I closed my eyes, but the memories didn't stop. Mark's arm around her, the way she leaned into him, like it was natural. Damn it! I muttered under my breath, slamming my fist against the dashboard. But anger didn't help. It never did. Because beneath the anger was pain. I didn't drive home. Couldn't. Not yet. I needed space. Distance. A chance to breathe without feeling like the walls were closing in on me. So I drove. Aimlessly. For hours. Letting the quiet hum of the engine drown out the chaos in my head. The city blurred past me. Streetlights. Empty sidewalks. But I barely saw any of it. Because all I could see was her. Lily, the woman I had built a life with, the woman I had trusted with my heart, and she had shattered it. I finally pulled into an empty parking lot, a quiet spot overlooking the city. The lights stretched out before me, glittering in the darkness, but they felt distant, like everything else in my life. I sat there for a long time, staring at nothing, feeling everything. How did we get here? We had been so happy. Hadn't we? I replayed the moments in my mind. The good times. The laughter. The nights we stayed up talking about our future. The promises we made. But promises, they mean nothing when they're broken. I took a deep breath, trying to steady myself. But it was no use. Because no matter how hard I tried to hold it all in, the weight was crushing me. I felt the first tear slip down my cheek. And then another. I hadn't cried in years. But tonight, couldn't stop. I let it all out. The pain, the anger, the heartbreak, everything I had been holding inside, poured out of me. And when it was over, when the tears stopped, all that was left was emptiness. I sat in that parking lot until the first light of dawn crept over the horizon. And for the first time, I felt truly alone. But I couldn't stay here forever. I had to face it. Face her. I wiped my face, taking a shaky breath as I started the car. My hands were steadier now. My heart, not so much. But I was ready. Or at least I had to be. When I pulled into the driveway, the house looked the same. But it felt different. Colder. Like it knew what had happened. What had been lost. I walked inside, and the silence greeted me like an old friend. But this silence, it wasn't comforting. It was heavy, suffocating, because it wasn't the silence of peace. It was the silence of a home that had been broken. Lily was in the kitchen. Her back was to me, but she knew I was there. I could feel the tension in the air. Derek! Her voice was soft, barely above a whisper, but I heard it. and it cut through me like a blade. I didn't speak. Not yet. I needed a moment. A moment to gather the pieces of myself. Before I shattered again. Derek! She tried again, her voice trembling. I can explain. I clenched my jaw. Explain? What was there to explain? I took a step forward, my eyes finally meeting hers. And for the first time, she looked afraid. Explain. I echoed softly, my voice barely above a whisper. But the weight in it was crushing. Her lips quivered. Derek, please. Tears welled up in her eyes. But I didn't move. Couldn't. Why? The word slipped out before I could stop it. Soft, but laced with pain. Lily's breath caught. Her eyes filled with guilt. But guilt wasn't enough. I didn't mean for this to happen, she whispered. Her voice cracked, but the cracks were nothing compared to the ones she had left in me. How long? The question hung in the air, heavy, unforgiving. Lily's eyes darted away. She couldn't look at me, because the truth was too ugly. 6 months, she whispered. The words barely made it out, but they hit me like a freight train. 6 months. Half a year. While I was loving her, she was loving him. I took a shaky breath, trying to steady myself. But the ground beneath me felt like it was crumbling. Why? I asked again, my voice softer this time. But the pain, it was louder than ever. Lily wiped at her tears, her hands shaking. I don't know, she murmured, her voice breaking. I was lost. I didn't mean to. Stop. The word was quiet, but it was enough to make her freeze. I couldn't listen to this. Not now. Were you ever going to tell me? I asked softly, my eyes searching hers. But I already knew the answer. Lily's silence said everything. My chest tightened, my throat burning. I trusted you, I whispered, my voice barely holding together. I gave you everything, Lily. Her tears fell freely now, but I didn't move to comfort her, because this time, she was the one who had broken us. Derek. Her voice was barely a whisper, but I couldn't hear her anymore, because the distance between us was too great. I turned away, because staying would destroy me. Where are you going? She asked softly, her voice trembling, but I didn't look back. Out. I murmured, my voice hollow. I need space. Lily didn't stop me, because she knew. This time, she couldn't fix what was broken. As I stepped outside, the cool breeze hit me. But it didn't bring comfort, because no matter how far I went, the pain followed. I didn't know where I was going, but I knew one thing for sure. I couldn't stay here. Not anymore. They say the hardest part isn't walking away. It's knowing when it's time to go. I had left the house that night, but no matter how far I drove, the pain followed. I didn't know where I was going. I just needed space. Or something that didn't remind me of her, of us. The city was quieter at night. Streetlights cast long shadows across empty sidewalks. But even in the silence, my mind was anything but quiet. Lily's voice echoed in my head. Her whispers, her lies, her promises. 6 months. Half a year of betrayal. While I was loving her, she was loving him. My fingers clenched around the steering wheel. I should have been angry. I wanted to be. But beneath the anger was grief, because I wasn't just losing her. I was losing everything. The life we had built, the dreams we had shared, the future we had planned. And now, it was gone. I pulled into the same parking lot I had driven to the night before. The quiet spot overlooking the city. A place where I could think. Or at least, try to. I shut off the engine and leaned back, staring at the city lights stretching out in front of me. The world kept moving, even when mine was falling apart. I ran a hand down my face, exhaling slowly. What now? I had caught them, seen it with my own eyes. There was no going back from that. No fixing it.
No forgetting.
But leaving was different. It wasn't just walking out the door. It was ending everything. And endings, they aren't easy. I had spent over a decade loving her, fighting for her, building a life with her. And now, I had to let it all go. But how do you let go of something that's been your everything? My thoughts spiraled, memories crashing over me like waves. Our first apartment, the night I proposed, the way she looked at me when she said yes. Was any of it real? A knot formed in my throat, because I didn't know anymore. I closed my eyes, trying to breathe through the ache in my chest. But the pain, it wasn't going anywhere. My phone buzzed, pulling me back to the present. Lily. Her name flashed across the screen. My chest tightened. I wasn't ready for this. I let it ring. Once, twice. But I couldn't bring myself to answer. Not yet. The buzzing stopped. But a few seconds later, a message. Derek, please come home. We need to talk. Talk? What was left to talk about? I stared at the message. My jaw clenched. The words blurred as my mind filled with all the things I wanted to say. All the things I couldn't. I can't lose you. Her words from that night echoed in my mind. But the truth was, she had already lost me. I set the phone down. I couldn't answer her. Not now. Minutes passed. Maybe hours. I wasn't sure anymore. Time felt meaningless. But eventually, I knew I had to go back. Not for her. Not for us. But for me. Because I couldn't live in this limbo. This space between knowing and leaving. I needed closure. I started the engine. The sound breaking the stillness around me. My heart was pounding. But my mind was clear. It was time. When I pulled into the driveway, the house felt different, like it was holding its breath, waiting for the inevitable. I stepped inside. The silence was louder than ever. But I wasn't afraid of it anymore, because I was ready to face her. Lily was in the living room, sitting on the couch. Her eyes were red, her face pale. She looked up the moment I walked in. And in that instant, I saw it. Regret, pain, fear. But it was too late for that. Too late for us. Derek. Her voice was barely a whisper. But I heard it, and it hurt more than I thought it would. Where were you? She asked softly, her eyes pleading. I didn't answer, because the answer didn't matter anymore. I was giving us both some space, I murmured, my voice calmer than I felt. Lily's eyes filled with fresh tears. Derek, please. I sat down across from her. But the distance between us felt infinite. Why? The word slipped out before I could stop it. Soft, but laced with pain. Lily's lip quivered. Her hands trembled in her lap. I don't know, she whispered, her voice breaking. A lie. Even now, she was lying. Don't do that, I murmured, my voice barely above a whisper. Don't tell me you don't know. Her tears spilled over, but I didn't move. Couldn't. I was lonely, she whispered, her voice shaking. Things, they weren't the same between us, Derek. And I didn't know how to fix it. Lonely. The word hit me like a punch to the gut. You should have talked to me, I said softly, my throat tight. Not him. Lily looked down, her shoulders shaking with quiet sobs. I know. Her voice was barely audible. But it's too late now, isn't it? Yes, it was. Who is he? The words tasted bitter, but I needed to hear it from her. Mark. The name came out like a curse, soft, but it shattered what little was left between us. Mark. I repeated it softly, the name echoing through the hollow space inside me. I never stopped thinking about him, she whispered. Her words were barely audible, but they were louder than a scream. My chest tightened. There it was, the truth I had been running from. So this wasn't an accident? I murmured, my voice quieter than I expected. Lily's silence said it all. I leaned back, my body suddenly feeling too heavy to hold up. Derek, her voice cracked. I never wanted to hurt you, but she did, and there was no taking it back. I need to know one thing, I said softly, my eyes meeting hers. Do you love him? Lily's face crumbled. Her eyes filled with fresh tears. Derek, do you love him? The question hung in the air, suffocating both of us. Her silence stretched. Seconds felt like hours. And then, she nodded. It was small, barely noticeable, but I saw it. And it was enough. Everything inside me broke. "I'm sorry," she whispered. But her words, they meant nothing now. I stood up slowly. My body felt heavy, but my mind was clear. "Derek?" Lily's voice was desperate now. But I couldn't stay. Not after this. "Goodbye, Lily," I murmured softly, turning toward the door. "Wait!" Her voice cracked. But I didn't stop. Because this time, I wasn't looking back. I stepped outside, the cool night air hitting me. But this time, felt different. Lighter. Because for the first time, I was free. They say goodbye is just a word. But when you're saying it to someone you've built your life around, it feels like the end of the world. The night air felt different as I walked away. Cool. Crisp. But there was no comfort in it. Because behind me, I was leaving everything I had ever known. Lily didn't call out again. She didn't run after me. And that hurt the most. For a moment, I stood by my car, my hand resting on the door handle. My mind screamed at me to go back, to give her one last chance, to fix what was broken. But some things can't be fixed. I opened the door and got in. My hands trembled as I gripped the steering wheel. My heart pounded, every beat echoing in the hollow space inside me. Was this really happening? I had always thought we were unbreakable, that no matter how hard life got, we'd find a way back to each other. But now, there was no going back. I stared at the house for a long moment. Our home, the place where we had built dreams, laughed, loved. But now, it was just a house. And I was just a man who didn't belong there anymore. This is it. The thought hit me harder than I expected. This was the moment I let go. I didn't know how long I sat there. But eventually, I drove away. And this time, I didn't look back. The road stretched ahead, but my mind was stuck in the past. Every mile I put between us felt heavier, like I was carrying the weight of what we used to be. I ended up at the same place, the Overlook, where the city lights stretched out endlessly. But tonight, they felt dimmer. I parked, shutting off the engine. And for a moment, I just sat there, letting the silence sink in. The emptiness inside me was louder than any sound. But I needed it. I needed to feel this. Because once you face the pain, you can finally start to heal. My mind wandered back to the beginning. To us. I remembered the first time I met Lily. The way she laughed. The way her eyes lit up when she talked about her dreams. She was everything I had ever wanted. And for a while, she was mine. But somewhere along the way, we lost each other. Or maybe, she had already left. The signs had been there. I just hadn't wanted to see them. "You should have fought harder," a voice whispered in the back of my mind. But I did. I fought for us, while she fought for him. I leaned back, closing my eyes, letting the ache settle deeper. I had done everything I could. And now, it was time to let go. But letting go doesn't happen all at once. It happens in pieces. And tonight was just the beginning. My phone buzzed beside me. "Lily." Another message. "Derek, please talk to me. I'm so sorry. Please." I stared at the screen, my heart pounding. But I didn't reply. Couldn't. Because words wouldn't change what was already broken. I turned off the phone, letting it drop onto the passenger seat. This is what she chose. The thought hit me harder than I expected. She chose him. And now, I had to choose myself. The night dragged on, but I didn't move. I just sat there, letting the weight of goodbye settle into my bones. Because I knew this was the last one. When dawn finally broke over the horizon, I felt empty. But in that emptiness, there was clarity. I couldn't stay trapped in the past. I couldn't keep holding on to someone who had already let go. It was time to move forward. I started the engine, the hum of the car breaking the silence. But this time, it didn't feel as heavy. Because now, I was ready to leave. As I drove away from the city, the weight in my chest began to lift. Not all at once, but enough. Enough to take the first step. Goodbye, Lily. The words echoed in my mind one last time. But this time, they didn't hurt as much. Because now, I was free. They say time heals all wounds. But standing at the edge of a broken life, time feels like a cruel joke. Days turned into weeks after I left. And yet, the silence still followed me. The house felt emptier. Even after I packed my things. Even after I moved into a small apartment across town. The emptiness came with me. I told myself it was just a phase. That eventually, the ache would fade. But some wounds don't heal that easily. I filled my days with work. Buried myself in projects. Took on extra clients. Anything to keep my mind from drifting back to her. But the nights were the hardest. The silence was louder in the dark. And no matter how much I tried to drown it out, it was always there, whispering reminders of what I had lost. I missed her.
Gål, I mist her.
Even after everything, even after the lies, I still missed her. But missing her didn't change what she had done. I had loved Lily with everything I had. I had given her my heart, my trust, my soul, and she had shattered it. Mark. His name still tasted bitter. Even though he was gone now, I had made sure of that. The message I sent him was enough to make him disappear. He wasn't stupid. He knew better than to cross me again. But getting rid of Mark didn't get rid of the pain, because he wasn't the real problem. She was. Lily had chosen him. Over me. Over us. And that was what hurt the most. I tried to hate her. Tried to let the anger consume me. But it never lasted. Because no matter how much she had hurt me, I had loved her too much. And that kind of love doesn't disappear overnight. But love wasn't enough. Not anymore. I stood in my new apartment, looking around at the bare walls. No memories. No history. Just space. It was quiet. Almost too quiet. But for the first time, I didn't mind. Because this space, it was mine. No ghosts. No lies. Just a fresh start. I poured myself a drink, letting the burn of the whiskey ground me. It was becoming a habit. One I wasn't proud of. But some nights, it was the only thing that numbed the ache. I leaned against the counter, staring out the window. The city lights blinked in the distance. Familiar. Comforting. Constant. Unlike Lily. I hadn't seen her since that night. Hadn't heard her voice. Except in my dreams, where she still haunted me. I thought about blocking her number. Deleting her messages. Erasing her from my life. But I couldn't. Not yet. Her last message still sat unread. Derek, please. Just talk to me. I hadn't answered. Because what was there left to say? What words could fix what was broken? But even as I told myself I was done, a part of me still wanted closure. Closure. It sounded so simple. But when your heart is involved, nothing is ever simple. I had tried to move on. Tried to forget her. But forgetting someone who had been your everything is impossible. And maybe I wasn't ready to let go completely. Not yet. One night, after another restless evening staring at the ceiling, I made a decision. I needed answers. Not for her. For me. I picked up my phone, my fingers hovering over her name. My heart pounded louder than it should have. Just one conversation. That's what I told myself. Derek. Her voice was soft when she answered. Fragile. Like she had been waiting for this call. I swallowed hard, my throat tight. Lily. Just saying her name brought everything back. Thank you for calling, she whispered, her voice barely above a breath. But I didn't respond right away, because I wasn't sure if I was ready for this. Why Lily? The question slipped out before I could stop it. Soft, but laced with pain. Silence stretched between us. And then, I don't know, she murmured. But I heard the truth in her voice. She did know. You don't get to say that, I whispered, my jaw clenched. Not after everything. I was lost, Derek. Her voice cracked. I didn't mean to hurt you, but she had. And her intentions didn't change that. I just Lily's voice trailed off, and I heard her inhale shakily. I missed him, Mark. Even hearing his name now, it burned. And you didn't think to tell me? My voice was softer now, weaker, because the fight inside me was gone. I was afraid, she whispered. Afraid that if I told you, I'd lose you. You lost me anyway. The words were on the tip of my tongue, but I couldn't say them, because hearing her voice brought back too much. Did you love him? The words were barely a whisper, but I needed to know. Lily's silence said everything. Derek, her voice cracked, but I couldn't do this. Not again. I didn't call to reopen old wounds, I murmured softly, swallowing the ache in my throat. I called to say goodbye. Silence. Long. Heavy. But this time felt different. Goodbye, Lily. My voice was calm. Final. Derek. Her voice was barely above a whisper, but I didn't let her finish. I ended the call, and this time, it was really over. I stared at the phone for a long moment, but the weight in my chest was gone. For the first time, I could breathe. The ache was still there. It would be, for a while. But now, I was free. I looked around the apartment. The bare walls, the empty shelves, a blank slate, and for the first time, I was ready to fill it. I wasn't sure where life would take me, but one thing was certain. I wasn't looking back. They say endings make way for new beginnings. But standing on the other side of heartbreak, beginnings feel impossible. It had been 2 months since I spoke to Lily, 2 months since I said goodbye, and in that time, everything changed. The silence that once suffocated me had become my comfort. The emptiness I had feared had become my freedom. I didn't think I'd make it this far. There were nights when the weight of it all crushed me, when memories of her voice, her touch, would pull me back into the darkness. But I didn't stay there. Not anymore. Because now, I was learning how to let go. I had stopped checking my phone, stopped wondering if she'd call. Because I finally realized I didn't need her to. I wasn't waiting for closure anymore. I had found it. Not in her words, not in our goodbye, but in myself. Moving on didn't happen all at once. It was slow, painful, messy. But day by day, I was getting there. I had thrown myself into work at first, keeping busy, filling the empty hours with meetings, deadlines, and projects that didn't mean anything. But eventually, I realized I needed more. I started taking long walks, clearing my mind, letting the cool air remind me I was still here. I went back to the gym, pushing myself harder, feeling the burn, letting the pain fuel something new. I even picked up an old hobby, photography, something I hadn't done in years. Capturing the world through a different lens gave me perspective. Slowly, piece by piece, I was rebuilding. The apartment didn't feel so empty anymore. I had filled the walls with moments that belonged to me. Photos of places I had visited. Landscapes that reminded me how small my problems really were. Things that made me feel alive. And for the first time in a long time, I did. But moving on isn't just about filling the silence. It's about facing it. One night, I found myself standing by the window, looking out at the city lights. The same view I had stared at so many nights before, but this time felt different. I wasn't haunted by the past anymore. I wasn't waiting for answers that would never come. I was just here, in this moment. And that's when I realized I was ready to stop surviving, ready to start living. The next morning, I did something I hadn't done in months. I went back to my favorite coffee shop, the one Lily and I used to go to. But this time, I was alone, and it felt good. I ordered my usual, sat by the window, and watched the world move around me. But for once, I wasn't looking for her. I was just being. That's when I saw her. Not Lily. Someone new. She was sitting a few tables away, lost in her book. A faint smile playing on her lips as she turned the page. I wasn't looking for anything. But sometimes, life finds you when you least expect it. Our eyes met for a brief moment, and something inside me shifted. I didn't move, didn't say anything. Not yet, because I wasn't rushing into anything this time. I was taking my time. But for the first time since everything fell apart, hope didn't feel so far away. I finished my coffee, letting the warmth settle in my chest. And as I stood to leave, our eyes met again. A soft smile. Simple. Uncomplicated. But it was real. And maybe that was enough. I walked out of the coffee shop, the cool breeze brushing against my face. And for the first time, the world felt lighter, because I wasn't carrying the past anymore. I was walking toward the future. A new dawn. And this time, I was ready for it.